Welcome, everybody. Hello. Happy Thursday evening. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. My name is Clara. I am faculty here at VCU School of Social Work. I'm also the assistant director with the Mental Health Initiatives. Usually, you all see Dr. Jacobs hosting these training sessions. She is actually out of town today for a conference, so I'm going to be filling in. I'm so glad that all of you could join us. Just a couple of housekeeping things, and then I'll go ahead and introduce Nicole. We are going to be sending out an attendance list towards the end of the training. And please fill that out when I send it out so we can give you attendance credit for showing up. We're going to have Nicole talk for about an hour, 15 minutes, and then until 7:30, we'll do some Q&A. But of course, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Please feel free to raise your hand. Um, we will get to those questions. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. I would like to introduce Nicole. Nicole has a ton of experience in the field of mental health. She's a licensed clinical social worker. She is a registered play therapist and supervisor and a certified trauma practitioner. She is an accomplished author, CEO, and owner of Replay Counseling Center, LLC, known as Replay Counseling and Consulting. She is a VCU School of Social Work alum, yay, and has over 20 years of experience working with children, adolescents, and families. Some of you may know Nicole. She also serves as an adjunct professor here at the VCU School of Social Work. And she also extends her expertise as a life coach, parenting consultant, and a mother of two grown kids. So, Nicole,
Yeah,
welcome, and I'll hand it over to you.
thank you. Thank you for that. I also see some familiar faces and names in here, so good to see some of my students. I don't get a chance to really talk a lot about play therapy in our practice classes, so it'll be fun. This is something that I can speak on for hours, and I have to condense this to an hour and 15 minutes. So whatever questions you have, just let me know. I like to be engaging, so if it is something that you want to ask while I am presenting, that's fine. You can raise your hand. We don't have to wait until the end, but I will also take questions at the end as well. Play therapy comes with a lot of interventions too, and a lot of the interventions, if we were in a 3 to 6 hour training, you would get a chance to engage in. So we won't be able to do that in this short amount of time, but towards the end, we will do a small practical engagement and hopefully I can get 1 or 2 people to participate. So just kind of keep that in mind. So when we get to the end and I call on someone to help me to demonstrate this, then you will all hopefully see what that looks like. So let's go ahead and get started. I think you have received the PowerPoint and 2 handouts. So I'll go through the PowerPoint, one of the handouts, and the second one is the intervention that we will talk about at the end. Uh, let's go ahead and get started. All right. So just a little bit about my journey. I started with intensive in-home that really got me to think about how to be creative working with children, especially when in-home required you to be in the home 3 hours at a time. So what am I going to do with these children? How am I going to engage them? And a lot of the things I came up with, play therapy, more directive techniques. We'll talk a little bit more about what directive and indirect was. A friend of mine, a colleague of mine, who's also a good friend, said, I would love for you to do an intervention book. So I put them all together. I had about 14 of them, and I came up with innovative healing techniques for children And it is an intervention book. It is on Amazon, and that's where a lot of these interventions that if we were in a 6 hour training, you would learn. But the one that you will learn is one I do often that people tell me that is very practical. My ideas of being practical. So, what we'll talk a little bit more about today is directive, and I'll tell you the difference between it, direct and non-direct, and what play therapy really is. So, if you are ever interested in going that route, you can become a registered play therapist one day. You'll kind of have an idea of how it works with children. So we will go over the fundamentals of play, talk a little bit about the therapeutic powers of play, which is something that I use as a tool to help people to understand how to document this. Like, how do you document play therapy? What do you tell the parents? So we'll talk about that as well. We'll identify the stages of play, so you'll know what it looks like to be in the beginning and when children start to feel more of their own. We kind of step back a little bit as play therapists, and then when we know to terminate, and talk a little bit about implicit bias, and just how to be culturally aware of the things that can come up in the playroom. Describe practical strategies. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll do that demonstration at the end of a treatment planning process. So when we think about the fundamentals of play, we are looking at play therapy being the way children express themselves and engage in therapy, the same way as adults, we would sit there on the couch and we would just talk. Expressive therapies includes play therapy, art therapy, and you would have to become an art therapist, which has its own educational piece, just like play therapy does. Music therapy, dance therapy. So all of those under expressive therapies come together. And there are trainings for expressive therapies where you can be around a bunch of different therapists, including play and art and dance and music. So the fundamentals looks like understanding the difference between direct and non-direct. So if you ever work with kids and you are in a setting where you have crayons and markers and you're asking them to draw something or draw a picture of them and their family, or if you're asking them to play a game, a lot of kids love Uno, that would be a directive technique that you would do with them. A non-direct technique is when you actually have had a lot of the trainings, 150 hours of CEs that you would have to go on through for 2 years. Some people graduate their MSW or graduate from grad school, want to become play therapists, and they get the hours for play therapy at the same time that they're getting the hours for their license because it's still going to take about 2 years. You can't become a play therapist until you're licensed. So getting it at the same time kind of makes sense for some people. With all that training, if you have access to certain categories of toys, so not you're just not using any toys, but toys that helps a child to explain what's going on in their world, like a house. And we will call it a house and not a dollhouse because boys don't want to play with dollhouses, so we call it a house. Um, Cars, army people, little houses, all the vehicles you can think of in a sense of emergency vehicles, like an ambulance, fire truck, police cars, the things that they would be able to say, this is what's going on in my world. I don't have to use words. You have all the toys here for me to use. That way I can explain it through my play, and then you can kind of see how they work through their problems that way. So,
Nicole, can I interrupt you for a second?
yeah.
Um, I don't believe that do you have a copy of the handouts? I don't believe that was sent out.
Oh, yeah, I sent it to Cassie, so I thought everyone got it.
Do you all have the handouts? Does anybody have it?
It wasn't in the email that was sent out earlier today, unless there's one
Yeah,
I haven't gotten.
Do
Yeah,
you
I
want me
yeah,
to try to send it to you real quick?
yeah.
Okay. All right, let me stop sharing and go behind the scenes.
Y'all, thank you for letting me know. I was just checking my email, checking to see if it was sent out. And today I realized the email that went out today was not. So I will get that to you right away. Thank you, everybody, for messaging in the chat, either me directly or in the chat. I appreciate that.
I know it's in here. Okay, I'm gonna forward.
Thank you for your patience, Nicole.
No problem. I am flexible. All right, hopefully you got that.
Well, hold on. Email takes a while.
Well, while we're surfing for that, any questions about what I've shared so far? Just kind of understanding a little bit of the background of what it looks like.
I have a question.
Yeah,
You said that some folks will get their licensure at the same time that they're also sitting for or getting their supervision for LCSW, but I'm assuming that's like two completely separate paths. It's not something that's overlapping. They might be doing it at the same time, but they're separate tracks, if I'm using those.
there is. So whereas LCSW, you're already in your job that the board has approved for you to get your hours, and you have your 1 hour a week for 100 hours for 2 years. With play therapy, you only need 34 hours in 2 years. So it's not as many hours, but it has to be separate because what you're being supervised for LCSW is totally different than what you would be supervised. But if you are in a setting where you're working with kids, the clients that you're talking about and you're starting to use some play therapy techniques and understanding the theories based on that, while you're doing that, they can kind of double dip a little bit and you can get a discount with some people if you are being supervised by an LCSW who also happens to be an RPT-S.
Thank you.
And they have to have an S at the end because the S means that they have been a play therapist long enough to become a supervisor. Yes, it is expensive to do both. Yeah. But you have 2 years and 150 hours in 2 years. I feel that is plenty of time because before the Association of Play Therapy, and if you're interested, it would be the letter A, the number 4, pt.org. That would be the website. They would allow you to do it on your own pace, and a lot of people are getting it done in 6 months, or actually 6 25-hour weekends, which sometimes ended up being 4 to 6 months. And then they said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We want you to do it a little bit longer, which is good because financially it helps. Yeah. All right, perfect. You all got those. So I will go ahead and go back to here. So I have a quote here that says, play is the child's natural medium of self-expression by Axeline. Virginia Axeline was a American psychologist and one of the pioneers of play therapy. She wrote two books that I'm aware of. One is called Dibs in Search of Self. Really good book, really old, but really good book. It reads almost like a novel, but what she does is throughout the book, she follows this one child named Dibs, and you can see even the transcripts of how she would speak to him during the sessions to see how a play therapist kind of speaks language. So we don't really ask questions. We talk more about, oh, I see you're working really hard on that. Or, Miss Nicole, do you like my picture? You put a lot of color in that picture. I can tell that this is important to you. And it would be the parents' role to say, oh, I love your picture. That's beautiful. That wouldn't be our role. So things like that, you'll learn how to really connect with the child to build up their self-esteem. So she also wrote the book called Play Therapy. When I say old, it was written in 1947. So it's been a long time. But people think, well, play therapy is new, but if she's writing about this in 1947, you can see that play therapy has been around for a while. Another person you might hear of is Gary Landreth, and he has an institute in Texas that has an awesome setup for a playroom. So if you are interested in becoming a non-direct play therapist, then you would have a playroom. The children would go in there. The ages for them is usually 4 to 12, although most 10 and 11, 12-year-olds don't really want to go in the playroom anymore, but you could still do some play therapy techniques with them. Let's see. when we talk about what we, since we're not asking questions and we're not playing with them, we are holding space for them. So just as if you were to kind of use silence with adults, you are holding space to work with the children while they're playing. You're just match like kind of tracking what they're saying. You're using reflection. You're paying attention to their emotions and kind of just noting that without asking questions. It's not about what they're doing that matters. It's that they're doing it. And same thing if they were to create a picture, it's not about that the picture is perfect or they did it a certain way. It's the fact that they created the picture. So children do not need to be taught how to play. Um, I always find this quote a little interesting. Um, their play is spontaneous, enjoyable, voluntary, and non-goal directed. And the reason why I find this interesting is because I can give you two examples of children that I've worked with. One, he was, I think, 4 years old. He was in the garage playing. Something happened in the garage and there was a fire. A lot of his toys were in the garage and he wouldn't go in the garage or walk past in front of it on the sidewalk because of the fire. And so his parents wanted him to work through that. Um, the basketball goals that you can put on the back of a door in a child's bedroom. I had one of those in the office, never really paid attention to it, but on the backboard of it, there was flames. And the child came in, and I have a little mini fire extinguisher. So all the miniatures in there, like size of Matchbox cars. He saw that, he took it, and he acted like he put the fire out and he found the fire engine and everything that he played with had to do with the fire engine, the fire truck, people in the house. And over time, without me having to ask questions, I already knew about the fire. He never really had to tell me anything. He worked through it and we went through some sessions where he finally got to the point where the parents is he's now riding his bike again or his little tricycle again. He's now going in the garage. So it's making sure that you have all the different tools in there. Again, what happens in our life? We have a fire extinguisher in our house. We might have a car out front. So things like that, so he can be able to play it out. So in this instance, perfect. He was spontaneous, it was enjoyable, it was non-goal directed. On the other hand, when talking about walks of life of working in the field, I also did a lot of foster care work. And those kids, once I was no longer in foster care, I started to see those children. And some of the things that would come up there, they didn't know how to play because of the trauma they endured, or they didn't have the toys, or they didn't have the engagement. I found this a little bit, I love Gary Landreth. He's one of the gurus, but I'm like, this doesn't like fit with everyone. Not everyone can come in there and even know what to play with. So I had a kiddo that had a hard time trying to figure out what to do with that. So instead, I had to roll with him with what he presented and the things that were more helpful for him, even at age 6. Although he looked like he was 4 because he had a lot of failure to thrive. So he was a really tiny kid. He was being teased a lot because he was so small. Um, he felt better when he can control something. So it's hard to be imaginative and play and be spontaneous when you want to control. So he would want me to play a game with him because games have rules. He doesn't have to think about that. He would want to paint because you could paint whatever you want. Or he spent a lot of time with that basketball goal, so much that the goal was I'm gonna make this many shots. And I remember counting to almost 100 tries just so he can get a certain amount in. And it was just something that he kept trying to accomplish. So for him, it was a goal of feeling that he can master something. So when we think about the therapeutic process, we're looking at play activities that can help multiple areas of the brain. So that creativity, flexibility of choice helps them to figure out how to solve problems. If we come in with an agenda because we have this treatment plan and we have to get these things done, it doesn't allow them to work through what they need to work through. So there are no goals as far as the child is concerned. Of course, because of insurance or our jobs and agency, there's goals. but the goal might be to increase the self-confidence or self-esteem, gain independence, decrease behaviors. But for the child in the playroom, there are no goals because the play is more important than the outcome. So we want to make sure that he's making changes and feeling better and doing things a little bit differently without us having to tell the child to do this. Therapists can enter into the child's world and help the child gain control. So while we're sitting there, we're holding space for the child. We're allowing them to do things like blow bubbles in my office. They look at me like I'm allowed to blow bubbles in the house. Yeah. So we do some things that they're not allowed to do at home. Many kids don't have markers because the parents are concerned they're going to mark everything. Wait, I can do paint in here. So those are the things that we're able to help them to feel, oh, she's not gonna, I spilled water and she just said water spills and we just moved on. That's how they gain that trust to let you in. And once they let you in, they share a little bit more and then their problems can be resolved. So I'm gonna pause here for a second. Are there any questions at this point?
Nicole, there is one question in the chat. Can you tell us the name of the first book you mentioned? I think it's the one that you said 1947, maybe? The one from the
Yeah.
1940s?
So it was Play Therapy by Virginia Axeline. And her other book is Dibs, Dibs, In Search of Self.
Mm.
Yep. And then there was a hand up. Was that the same question? I missed who put their hand up. They took it back down.
I had put my hand up.
Okay.
I just know that you had mentioned something about you worked in foster care at first, and then now but yeah, with play therapy. I was just interested, just I guess like how you got to where you are after like being in foster care. I'm a foster care and adoption worker now, and I'm really interested in play therapy.
Mhm.
So I was just wondering the route that you took to get to where you are, because I am a supervisor in social work, so I am trying to get my like LCSW hours in, but in my role, I mean, I can't do exactly play therapy. So I was just wondering what did that look like for you?
I think I began before they had strict rules with play therapy, gaining the hours. I would just go to trainings that were specific for play therapy hours. And then eventually, once I wasn't in foster care anymore and I was in a different agency, I said, this is really what I want to do. So I started out in foster care, left foster care, and went into early intervention. And still, I was with 0 to 3 year olds. So I was still working with kids and working with their parents. Then I was in the schools and doing day treatment and intensive in-home. And then after intensive in-home, I became the supervisor. And while I was doing that is when I really got a lot of the hours and decided, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to do private practice. And so that's where I really got to build up my playroom and really start working with kids. And all the agencies that I had worked at in the past started sending their foster kids to me. And that's why the foster care started. So I think at heart, those are probably my favorite clients, but they're the toughest ones to see in the playroom. When we think about the ages of working with children is ages 4 to 12, which is also, that's a lot of years in foster care at that point that they're not making progress. So the other piece about it is ages 4 to 12 and 24 to 26 sessions, which means about 6 months. But what I noticed, and I had an intern at one point look at all the kids that I was working with, and I asked, can you do sort of like a little research survey, not a survey, but analysis to see how long my clients really are here? Am I following these rules of 4 to 12 and 24 to 26 weeks? And all of them were within that, except for two families that were stuck in that limbo in foster care, that were still seeing their parents and feeling that disloyalty to their parents by feeling comfortable and loving in their foster family. And it wasn't until they had some finality, whether they were going back home or whether they were staying in permanent foster care or being adopted, that the change started happening. And that's kind of where the clock really should start in foster care. Probably not when you come in, but maybe once that's finalized, then we're looking at the 24 sessions. But it's supposed to be short. So when we think about theories, we're thinking about, oh, something that's short term, something that's long term. Play therapy should be about 6 weeks. I mean, 6 months. Yeah.
Nicole, we have a question in the chat,
Mhm.
and I like this question. The question is play therapy a good tool for adults?
Yes, but I would use the term therapeutic play or expressive play or expressive therapies. Um, More specifically, I will do a lot more art with adults, collages, paint. Um, Within play therapy, there is a modality called sand tray. And with sand tray, I do a lot of sand tray with adults. And that's a whole nother kind of certification or a lot more training, but you would still get the hours. If you wanted to do a lot of sand tray hours, you would still, that still counts towards your play therapy certification. But it is another specialty as well as with the art. So the playroom, since everything is so small, like the kitchen is for a 5-year-old and um, the little shopping carts and all those things, you don't have an adult in there. So it does start at 12, stop at 12. But the thought process of about letting them express themselves, I do a lot more music and paying attention to what my teens listen to and what they connect to and lyrics. So that would be a little bit more of music therapy. You just want to be mindful that you're not saying you're doing play therapy, art therapy, or music therapy without the actual credentials. Just like you wouldn't say you're an LCSW until you are. So you would use terms of I use music in therapy, or I used therapeutic art or therapeutic play. So I can't say I did art therapy. I could say I did art with a client or I did expressive arts. So just being mindful of the language. So thinking about those 24 to 26 sessions, you do an assessment pretty much as typical as a biopsychosocial, whatever your agency requires you to do an assessment. That's the same thing. But what I like to do is meet with the child and the parents together while I'm asking some of those questions. Of course, if there's a lot of trauma and some things that the parent does not want the child to know, then, we try to wait and the parent can talk without the child there, but it's important to see what that interaction is. If the child is playing and takes everything out and it's all over the floor and the parent's just dismissive of it, or if the parent says you can't touch anything, sit here and be quiet and be still, then I'll say, let them explore. It's okay. Or if the child's sitting there trying to open something and the parent goes and rushes and opens it immediately and doesn't allow the child to figure it out. So there's little things that I'm assessing with just that observation during that period. And then about 4 weeks after that, or 4 sessions after that, I'm allowing them to explore the room, allowing to explore the toys before I would say, okay, now we're starting to focus on a theme and I'm starting to notice how they're playing some things out. Because they're, oh, I didn't see this before. I didn't see that before. Until they can see everything, then you start noticing they keep playing the same way or they keep going and gravitating to the certain type of play. The type of play would be nurturing play. So that would be with the dolls or the babies, and they're feeding them, they're taking care of them, or shopping, or that aggressive play. Not that the child is being aggressive, but the aggressive play of them maybe setting up the blue and green army men and there's a war and they're trying to solve a conflict through the war. So that would be that. Or they want to sit there and build something, and they're trying to build it up high, and that would be mastery. They're mastering that. We're trying to put together a puzzle on their own, and we're just encouraging them and engaging with them, and they're doing that. That would be mastery. So those are kind of the skills that you're looking for. And with that process, you're building that rapport right along the side of that assessment. By the middle stage, they are gaining that independence. They know how to come in and do the work. They're not asking for questions. They feel confident. They know if they spill water, you're still going to forgive them and allow them to be in there. And you want to maybe have some parent sessions to just kind of get the parents involved in what are you doing at home so that we can continue to facilitate this growth? What questions do you have about your child's development? Um, and like the stage of development as far as maybe they're 10, but they're acting like they're 7. We need to treat them like they're 7. Let's talk about that. And then towards the end, some kids will come in and just they don't play the same anymore, or they're not as interested. And that's usually an indicator that they've worked through something and they're at the point of termination. And there's some activities to assess for that, like, oh, can you, draw a picture of what it was like before you came and what it's like now? And if you were to add feelings in there, what does that look like? So there's some ways to have an assessment of that termination. And then you can look at your notes and say, it's been about 5, 6 months, probably appropriate now. At that point, you might be seeing them every other week just so you could start weaning them from the sessions. What you're looking for is how to gain insight into their world, how to understand how they're thinking. And when we look at that, that would be more about the therapeutic powers of play. And this is also a great tool for a few things. One, understanding how to even explain play therapy to parents because you're just playing with my child. I want my child to come and talk to you. Did they tell you about what happened today? Well, it's the child's job to come and tell me. If the child doesn't tell me, then maybe the child is working it out, and we want to trust that process. Um, this is what, and this is a whole book, but this one snapshot pretty much explains the therapeutic powers of play. I like to use the inner circle for what I've done. So I've helped the child facilitate communication. So if they express something in their art, that would be self-expression. A lot of times you learn something that they might not be aware of. So you have access to the unconscious. Maybe you are teaching something and that would be direct or indirect, depending on how your engagement is. Then we're looking at fosters emotional wellness. So what positive emotions are coming out, hopefully counter conditioning some of those fears. They're feeling more confident. Even if that kiddo doesn't want to come in without their parent and now they're able to come in there without and the parent can wait in the waiting room. How do they manage their stress? Then you're looking at enhancing social relationships with all you do is work with them. You're having that therapeutic relationship. You did something. You enhance social relationships. Hopefully, it's a healthy attachment because the relationship with us would be a good way of saying, now I understand what it should be like with an adult. This person truly unconditional positive regard accepts me. You have empathy for them, as well as that social competence hopefully is increased. And then the last one would be increased personal strengths. So if they are doing that play of aggression with the war, hopefully they are creative problem solving. They're showing more resilience in how they manage conflicts in school or maybe even at home. Hopefully their behavior starts to improve so that way they are regulating their emotions and hopefully increasing their self-esteem. So I like to use this as a cheat sheet for even typing your notes. You can use the language here. What did I do? This is what I did. And telling the parents, this is what our goals are. So this is kind of an easy way of looking at why play therapy is important. Any questions about this one? Okay. One of the things to consider when you are working with kids is what is in your toolbox, whether you just have a travel one, or what you might have in your room for the playroom. And you want to make sure that you can manage your implicit bias or have some cultural humility checklist. And so one of the handouts, hopefully, that you received and I'm skipping to it so you could see this, and then I'll go back a few slides. This is a quick self-awareness check on your reflexivity, um, how you educate yourself about and the differences of the populations that you work with, making sure that you are applying your knowledge with respect to the differences of the clients, flexible in making last minute changes, I have one example of, but this is before Crayola created the colors of the world, which is a great tool to have because it addresses all the colors of the skin colors possible so far. I'm sure there should be more, but it even has the green eye color, it has blue eye color, it has the red hair instead of just a regular box of crayons. So I remember having a child who I asked him to draw a picture of him and his family, and it was a regular box. So there was yellow and then there was peach. And he said, we're not either of these colors. We're not yellow. We're not peach. My mom is a different color. So he ended up using yellow for himself and then peach for mom. And this was before they had this. And that would be problem solving skills. He figured it out. He didn't throw a tantrum. He didn't say he wasn't going to do it. He was able to express himself to say, that it wasn't the right ones. And then later on, now we have markers, crayons, and color pencils that are colors of the world. So now they are excited to say, I can find the color that I am, and my family has different colors in there. And when I want to draw the picture. So that would be me using inclusive behavior of having those crayons and markers and being culturally sensitive and being able to be flexible to make last minute changes. So that would be two examples of how I could include this. Another one is having families of different shades too. And also, I have families that are complete colors. So Amazon has a set of um, blue family, red family, yellow family, and it even comes with a little baby and a little dog. I don't know why there's not a cat in there. I think the cat should be in there too. But that gives an example, and I think it's so fun when sometimes the child doesn't choose the whole red family and they'll choose red, yellow, green, and blue, and then they'll say that these are their friends. If you don't have the right toys, then it's hard for you to make sure that they can express that. But if you have close enough toys and they tell you, you don't have this, and this is what I want to use instead, that also is a good way for them to learn how to move around things and be flexible. But it gives you an idea of maybe this is something that I have to have. They say you shouldn't collect toys. The toys should be something that's a staple, but sometimes you have to upgrade toys. So I used to have a television that was a bigger box of a television that one time a child was putting stuff in the house and said, "Oh, here's the microwave." And I was like, "Oh, that makes sense because TVs are flat screens now." So he was able to figure it out and said it was a microwave. I went and found a flat screen TV. So now we have a microwave and a flat screen TV because even though that was a TV, to him it was a microwave. And we don't want to correct that because he needed to do what he needed to do and it worked. I have a little miniature wine bottle that sometimes is a ketchup because that's what the child sees it as. And that's what it is, ketchup. And some other people say, oh, I'm putting this with my mom because my mom drinks wine every night. All right, I'm glad I had the wine bottle because it's important for us to know this. And they will say those types of things, but you have to kind of have it there in order for them to say it. So moving back a few slides, just talking about the evolution of culture in specific work. So you can see I highlighted the pieces that cultural competence or humility has been around for a long time and has been evolving from the medical field, nursing, psychology, and we know we talk about it in social work. But it's also something that we need to address in play therapy. And play therapy has, I want to say, it's been maybe 3 years now, is now something that is required for us to have 2 or 3 hours of CEs specifically for cultural humility now. So they're making that a requirement. Just like when you get your license, you have to have certain amount of hours for ethics for LCSW, and that changes for states because now DC makes you have a health requirement 4 hours for their license. So every state's going to have some requirement. So play therapy also wants to encourage exploring your own culture and attitudes and biases, specifically when working with children for play therapy. So I would say if you have this handout and you have some time, it's a little blurred, but you can print it out and figure out, is this a good way to keep track of where you are and maybe give yourself some goals of what you might need to focus on or work on. When you take this step here, looking at this handout, you want to look at three things: your awareness, your knowledge, and skills. So, are you aware? How do you value diversity? How do you check in to see what those assumptions and stereotypes are? Where's your self-reflection? Sometimes my reflection comes in while I'm putting the toys away. I can really see up close how they built that world, how they designed the story in the house. Um, I say clean up their space because they don't clean up. We don't have them clean up. What they create, that is their therapy. Just as though if you sat there and talked to your therapist and your therapist said, take all of that back, you didn't say any of that today. That would what it would be like if you asked a child to clean up their story. So that's something to share with the parent. So the parent didn't say, oh, you didn't clean up. What are you doing? Nope, they're not supposed to clean up. But it also helps me to see where are they? What are they doing? What did I miss that I couldn't see because I wasn't right on top of them? Oh, I didn't notice that they did that. Good note for me. So, I thought it was this, but it's not. So there's a way for you to find out how you're checking in with yourself. You also want to be curious, curious thinking, having opportunities to learn more, to adjust things, listening to what the child says, because they're usually going to finally be comfortable enough to share what they need to share with you. And it's important to make sure that you listen. So be aware of any areas of discomfort, privilege, ambiguity, so that way you can work on that. So when we think about how does the powers of play come into play with this, you could be facilitating communication, self-expression, increasing personal strengths. That would be problem solving, self-esteem, and self-regulation. So you could see how diversity and awareness comes into play with the therapeutic powers of play. Is there a question, Clara?
Yes, there's a question in the chat. How do you deal with children with destructive behaviors?
So if you feel that are you saying if they're going to be destructive in the playroom or if they have destructive behaviors and you're working with them in play therapy? I can answer both ways, I guess.
In play therapy.
In play therapy. So if they're coming in there and they have the disruptive behavior or destructive, if they are showing destruction in there, then you do some limit setting, and it's limit setting 1, 2, 3. Um, the first limit is, oh, crayons aren't for breaking. They like to stay together. Even though broken crayons can color, let's keep them this way. And then usually the child would oblige. But if they continue to break the crayons, you could say, remember, crayons aren't for breaking. If they continue to break, we'll have to put them away. And then if they do it, then it's like, okay, it's time for the crayons to go in timeout and we can play with something else. And that way you're not chastising them, you're not putting them in timeout, you're not stopping, but you're taking the thing away and still allowing them to find something else. Usually that works enough for them to continue because you have provided structure, chance, and discipline in a way that still allows you to show that you accept them. Um, if you want to address the behavior as you're really having a hard time expressing yourself, you're having some emotions right now. Here's another way we can get those emotions out, and then you can find other ways of being destructive. I've given them paper that they can just rip up, crumble it up, throw it away, let's get it out, and you're kind of prescribing the symptom instead of saying don't do it. There's no no's in play therapy. There's more of um, we can do this. Let's try this instead. It looks like you want to do that. But the ball is for rolling in here instead of saying we don't throw the ball. The ball is for rolling. Let's roll it back and forth to each other. Um, I have really not had any difficulties with that. I had one kid throw in the sand. I said, the sand's not for throwing. He did it again. I said, well, if the sand keeps making it out the box, then we'll have to stop. So he, I remember this, he threw the sand and then closed the box and walked away. So he accepted the limit, but he was like, I'm gonna throw it one more time before she tells me I'm gonna have to put it away. I'm like, oh, at least you respected the limit. And he never did that again. He never came back and did it again. So hopefully that answered that question.
I have a couple more questions, Nicole.
Mhm.
If they start to clean up, would you ask them to stop?
I do. I'm like, oh, you created this. You don't have to clean this up. And they'll say, oh, but I was told not to leave it a mess or I want to clean them after myself. And here we don't have the kids clean up. They leave things just the way they are. Now, if they become anxious and it's something that they have to do, then I allow them to do it. Or I'll say you could put them all over here. Another thing I'll say is I have to clean them in between. So if you put them back, I'm not going to know which ones I have to clean. And sometimes they let that one go. Um, but there's been times where because they're anxious and they want it to complete it, I've allowed them to do it. If it's a game, we kind of put the game to get put together the game back together and put that away. That's different than if they create this whole house of a family that had a problem. I'm not going to have them put all the things in the house away. If they built the whole Lego thing, I'm not going to have them put that away.
Another question in the chat, Nicole, is how do you walk the line between noticing, oops, sorry, between noticing the details of the world the child built
Hmm.
while not reading into the details in a way that could not be accurate, like
Yep.
possibly you're projecting?
Yeah. So if they are narrating as they're playing and they're telling their story, then they're telling you exactly what it is. And then you might take a note for yourself to say, I noticed that they keep using this person. I'm wondering if that might be that person's parent. Um, Children play in the metaphor. They don't always say this is me, mom, dad. So they will just say this is the child and this is the parents and this is what's happening. If it's very similar to what you know is happening at home, you could pretty much make an assumption that you may assume that. You could say that in your note, it seemed like this may be what was happening, but the child did not confirm that, so we don't make that definite. If it is, then he's or she is working through that problem, and the whole point is for them to work through it, not that we know what it is. We might never know. Now, if they come out and say this is me and this is what happened, then you know for certain. But we don't have to know what they're doing. We just have to be there to help them facilitate the process of working through it.
Nicole, how do you decide what kind of play is best to use? Do you just put everything out and see what they gravitate towards? Do you introduce new things throughout the treatment plan or stick to what they typically use?
So you introduce everything. So if you actually have a real setup in a playroom, everything's in there. Um, and you can just say, oh, over here we have a house, we have people, we have the furniture. Over here we have the art supplies. Over here we have the kitchen set. We have the babies and people. We have puppets over here. So all the sections, you just kind of let them know and you just let them go in there and explore. If you're in a typical office and you have like different sections of things, I do the same thing. I'll open up the cabinets and say, here is this and this and this. Would you like to do this? Here's a sand tray. Would you like to do art today? And then they can choose what they or games. And then they can choose what they would like to play with. But you let them know what's in there. You don't introduce it in a sense to say, I'm letting you know we have art today because I want you to do art. You let them know all that's in there. They know the lay of the land. They come in and they do it.
So, to clarify, if the child is playing with the house but not narrating, it isn't appropriate to ask probing questions. We're
No.
only going off what they're willing to share. Is that right?
Yes. But what you'll say is, oh, you put the baby up there. Okay, you're putting the furniture in that room. Now you're moving that out. Oh, you made a sad face. There's something going on there. You're reflecting, you're tracking emotions, but you're not asking any questions. Usually when you do that, they'll tell you or they'll say yes or they'll give you more context, especially if you're wrong. They'll say, no, that's not what happened. This is what it is. And so part of the process of learning is learning how to track and reflect, um, and not ask questions, which is a process. Yeah.
Are there certain symbols or elements of play that tend to repeat themselves and hold meaning to make it easier to interpret?
And the word interpret should not be in the vocabulary when it comes to play.
Ooh.
So no interpreting. We're not there to interpret. Um, if they're playing out a theme, you want to see the theme progressing. If they're stuck in playing the same thing over and over again, that's called stagnant play. If they're stagnant, they're stuck for a reason, and then that would be a supervision to talk about how to move them past that stagnant phase. And that would be part of your supervision. Like, what am I doing? I'm noticing that they're stuck here, or I notice that they keep playing up to a certain point and they stop. Something's going on if they can't continue, and you would note that.
Okay. Can you give an example of stagnant play, Nicole?
So if you have someone that comes in and plays the same way with the same people in the dollhouse over and over and over again, and nothing has changed at all. But before that, they were doing different things. But for the last 4 sessions, it's the same exact process with no progress. Then that would be stagnant. Yeah.
And there, we also have a question about documentation, but I think you said in the beginning that you're going to cover that, right? So leave that question maybe till you get to it.
Well, the documentation would be more about what you notice that the person is expressing and less about what you did. So going back to that one pager of the therapeutic powers of play, did you facilitate conversation? Did they master something? Did they complete something independently? Did they express feelings and emotions? Did they through the play, did they solve, a problem? So if I saw them playing out a war, I would say that they had some unresolved conflict because the war kept happening. Sometimes the people die and they come back and they die and they come back and they die and they come back. It's unresolved. But if they died and they took over the land and they won, it's resolved conflict. And I would note that they played out a situation where there was a problem and they resolved the conflict. And that would be more of what I would be saying instead of saying they played war with, the blue and red army men. So you're not going to say we played Uno. We're going to say we engaged in the therapeutic exchange intervention where we took turns, practiced patience and communication and shared. So it's really more about what happened in that. If we played checkers and they were able to stop and think about their moves, then I'm talking about the process of taking time, thinking before they act, not being impulsive, not that we played checkers. And all of this would be something that you would learn with supervision, which is why you have 2 years to practice this. Yeah. Taylor?
I have a question. Oh, can y'all hear me? I think my internet might be funky.
Yeah, I can hear
Yeah.
you.
Um, Curious if this is a best practice from your perspective. This is something I saw at my placement. A student was playing in a home, a dollhouse, and was acting out some like violent behavior in the home. And I was observing my supervisor, and she, how can I explain this? Like gave other options, I guess. Like instead of hitting, why don't we think about putting this girl in better pajamas? I guess the girl had wet the bed and then she was acting out that she was getting punished for wetting the bed. But maybe I'm misunderstanding what I'm hearing. I'm hearing more like not redirecting, like we should just be observing. Is that what you would suggest versus giving those like other options or trying to stop that
I
negative
would I
play?
would I wouldn't stop it. The whole
Mm-hmm.
point is for the girl to do that, not us.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, oh, she wet the bed. And I would only say she wet the bed if I knew it. I wouldn't guess. So the child
Mm-hmm.
needs to tell me that she wet the bed. Oh, she wet the bed. Oh, she's getting a spanking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And now she's, I would just say what she's doing.
Okay. So you're not inserting, oh, we shouldn't be spanking.
Nope.
There's other ways that we can blah, blah, blah. None of that.
Nope, because then that's judgment. They know that for a reason. So if that's something that's happening at home, you have to be
Mm-hmm.
mindful of them.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're kind of correcting the parent's behavior through the child,
Mm-hmm.
which is confusing to the child.
Mm-hmm.
It's you now you can if you feel like it's abuse, then that's something that you're going to report. But
Right.
if it's something that happens at home, then you're going to note it and say it seems like the child, the doll or person is upset about what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And, it doesn't seem like she likes that very much. That's where you're putting the feeling there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Mhm. So we talked about the cultural awareness. We're going to look at knowledge, and then the next one would be, let me see, skills, and then we'll kind of go to that intervention. When we're thinking about knowledge and play, we want to understand our own interactions. So, Taylor, you bring up a good point of just being biased, not even just culturally, but just biased in the sense of this is how I think it's supposed to go. There's judgment there, and it's unconditional positive regard, and it's non-judgmental. So, if I'm saying it should be this way, then there's judgment there. So, we would want to check our own selves and why are we saying that? But then, if we were to be in a session and we had more time, I would say, okay, think about a client right now, and you do your intersectionality cluster with them. And then you do one on yourself. And then when you can come together, you can see where the differences are and be mindful. So if spanking is a culture for them and that's something that's appropriate because you're allowed to discipline your child, then we don't want to say it's wrong. We want to let the child express if the child doesn't like it. And if the child doesn't like it, then maybe the child can bring that to the parent that I don't like this or in a safe way. And that would be coming from the child. So that would be facilitating communication, helping with self-expression, and maybe having a play therapy session with the parent where the child could express that. Not that we're leading it, but it would be the child's idea to say, I don't like this. I wish mommy wouldn't do this to me. Oh, let's figure out what we can do with that because now it's coming from the child, not us. So we have to know where we come from, where our limitations are, and we have to have an open communication. And that's where, again, supervision comes into play, or even the work with therapists of this is something that's coming up for me. And so it would be important to maybe do an eco map to understand what the systems are with the child, to understand where they're coming from and why they might play the way they play. And you don't have to necessarily do this with the child. You could do this during the assessment. You could do this with the parent, but it might give you some insight. They might be playing one way, and then the next time they come in, they play at a whole birthday party. 9 times out of 10, the parent's going to say, "Oh yeah, did you tell them what you did this weekend? Did you tell them you went to your cousin's birthday party?" They already kind of did without telling you because they played it out. They didn't have to tell you that's what happened, but you can tell something's changed at home and they're playing out their situation. So it's good to have birthday cake there too. So when we think about documenting this with the therapeutic powers, we're looking at fostering emotional wellness, hopefully reaching catharsis and finding positive emotions. The last one would be adapting to different situations when you are looking at skills. How can you be flexible? How can you be aware of your thoughts when you are coming into the session? This is kind of also where countertransference comes into play for you to realize this is what's coming up for me. You want to communicate across cultural relationships and respect those cross-cultural situations that can come up. Become engaged, act as an ally. This is a perfect time to maybe think about how am I working with the parents and enhancing those relationships and maybe learning from them, but also helping the parents to navigate what's happening with the child at home. You you approach this with empathy as well as your own social competence. So here's one practical strategy that we're going to go through. If you have the handout, you'll see the full story. So basically, what I did was, how can I get a child to come up with their own goals without me just saying that this is the treatment plan, and just here, sign this treatment plan. So PATH stands for persevere always through hardship. And you have a picture of the path and you have a picture of the doorway. And what I will do is read the story of the Wizard of Oz to the child. And this is a little bit about bibliotherapy. Bibliotherapy is a technique where you read a story that kind of has a ending in there. It has a problem that gets solved, but you don't ask to talk about it or reflect on it or anything like that. You just kind of read the story and let it be. And specifically in the story of The Wizard of Oz, there's an issue. There's characters that need to get something that they want accomplished. Dorothy wants to go home. The Tin Man wants a heart. The lion wants to be brave, and Scarecrow wants a brain. And they go to the wizard, and they realize that he was a fraud. He didn't have the power to do this, but the obstacles that they went through to get there showed that they already had all the things that they needed in the first place. So I'm reading this to the child. The child might be, sometimes I'll let them play with Play-Doh. They might be just kind of coloring or whatever while they're doing this. And then I kind of do the actual activity. So can I have a volunteer to walk through this intervention with me and be a client?
I can do it.
Okay, that's Rebecca, right?
Yes.
All right, thanks, Rebecca. All right, I
Yeah.
want you to act like a child. So you're only going to give responses like a kid would. So the code cannot be something that you found in the therapeutic book. It has to be something the kid would want.
Okay.
So let's start with, how old are you as this child?
7.
All right. So what possibly could be going on that you would want this thing to change? And you can ask a miracle question, like if you woke up tomorrow, you know, what would be changed in your life? What would it look like?
Hmm. No more bullies in school.
Ah, okay. So how do you feel about the bullies? What's happening with the bullies?
I feel sad.
Hmm. You don't want to feel sad anymore.
Mm-mm. I don't want to go to school.
Hmm.
I want to be homeschooled.
Hmm. So if the bullies weren't there anymore, would you be okay with going to school?
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe the goal could be to feel happy about going to school.
Yeah.
Okay. This is going to be a hard one, Rebecca. You got me getting the run for my money today. All right. So because this is a PDF, I'm going to type on the text box to be happy to go to school.
Yes.
All right. So that's what a child would say. And that would go here in the doorway. Now, on the path, I kind of put lines here and we would come up with 3 objectives to help. So, what would have to happen for you to be happy? And I want to think about what we can do that's in your power. What can you do to feel better about going to school?
Hmm. And this is within the lens of a 7-year-old?
Yep.
Okay. Hmm. Going out for ice cream after?
Ah, okay. So you kind of want some sort of a reward.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And that would go in one of them. What else?
Um, for mom and dad to listen.
Hmm. What would you like them to know?
Hmm. How the bullies make me feel.
Hmm. Okay. And how could they find that out?
Um, I cry when I come home.
Hmm. So when you cry when you come home, do you tell them what's happening?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel that it's okay to cry to mom and dad?
Not always.
Okay. So would you rather tell them and not cry? Or do you want to, is it okay to cry sometimes if you tell them?
It's okay sometimes.
Okay.
But sometimes I'm trying to think of a 7-year-old, but sometimes they don't believe me.
So maybe I say and not cry, but sometimes you might.
Yeah.
Okay. And then if you could think of one more, what would it be? One more thing that would help you to be happier at school.
Hmm. For my teacher to, I don't know, pay attention
Mm.
or, look at me.
When it's happening?
Hmm. Or stop the bullies.
Okay. So you see how I had to kind of reword it for an action for the child to do? Because the child's going to want the parents to stop it, the teacher to stop it. So you want to ask questions for it to get to a point where the child has to go talk to the teacher. The child has to share with mom and dad. And that would go back to that self-expression and problem solving with that therapeutic powers play. Then we would take this treatment plan and we would word it, of course, in the way that we would document it clinically. But we would take this sheet of paper that we've written on, and a 7-year-old probably can't write in these little spots, so we might have to do it for them. But if they did have decent handwriting, I've noticed the more and more I work with kids because of computers, they do not know how to write. But if they did, they would fill this out. And then you'd print it out and you would hold it for them. And every time you saw them, you would ask them, did you get a reward for going to school? Now, in order for that to work, the parents would need to be on board with the goals because the parents would have to reward them. And the reward could be something really small, like you get an extra 10 minutes on a game or a laptop or something. And maybe at the end of the week, you get ice cream because you went for 5 days. Um, how often did you talk to mom and dad when you came home when it happened? How often did you express to the teachers what was going on? And if the child says they did it, they then take a color, they color in each block just a little bit, and they continue to color it every time they come in if they've done it. Now, if they're not able to do one, but they're doing another one, and you have that they ended up talking to mom and dad, um, and they call that whole section, then they've done that. That means they've mastered that. They're getting used to talking and sharing that. But maybe they've only colored in a little bit, and I'm going to take some of this away, um, of that part, which means, oh, they got to do a little bit more talking with the teacher. And if they're getting maybe half a reward for ice cream, then maybe we need to encourage them to feel a little bit more engaged to go to school. Maybe help the parents give them more of an incentive or whatever that is. But the goal is once this path is completely colored in, then that means they've accomplished the goal and they get to color in the whole doorway. And if you did this because they had three goals, then you would have three sheets of paper. You'd have your three goals for your treatment plan, but this would be in their words for them to work on. And it's something that's tangible, visible for them to see. I had one kid actually ask if he could have a poster of it. I went to Staples and I printed this huge poster and he put it on, his mom said he put it on his bedroom wall. He had accomplished that goal in 3 weeks and he was consistent because it was something he wanted to do. Now, he's the only one that I went to Staples and paid money to get that poster, but he wanted to see it. But that's totally different than when we're sitting there and we have to be compliant with our documentation and we have to create a treatment plan that the child isn't part of. So thank you, Rebecca, for your 7-year-old brain. Um,
Absolutely.
any questions about this intervention?
Nikole, you have a question in the chat. Are parents usually present for full sessions with the kids?
Only when it's planned. And it would have to be specifically structured that the parent would be engaging and not sitting there observing and asking questions or interceding. But maybe I would have them build a sand world and a sand tray together. And then I'll facilitate that. Or a lot of times when I have parents, it is either an art session and they're doing a family crest, or there's an art activity that's called where they have to kind of create an aquarium and then you have to work together about what's in the aquarium and who feeds the fish and all those things, just trying to get them thinking about how to work together. It would be more of a structured family play therapy intervention. I do not allow parents in the playroom because that's for the children. But if it's going to be a parent-child session, then it's more specific to those interventions that are set for that. Christine?
That was actually my question also, so thank you. I'm working with a like a 5-year-old who is her big stress point seems to be that mom and dad talk badly about each other in front of her. And so thinking she's a little bit younger than the example we just gave, but thinking of like goals for her, how would I get that out of a 5-year-old? Do you find it more of a struggle as they're younger?
This technique wouldn't necessarily be for a 5-year-old. It would be
Okay.
for older, definitely. Yeah. Um, when they're 4, 5, and 6, it's really more about allowing the play to happen, and the goal is really more related to the reason why they were referred to you and why they're there.
Thank you.
Rebecca? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Is the path intervention strictly for play therapy?
I've used it with adults too.
Okay, because I do family-centered treatment. So I like the whole family is my client. And so we
Okay.
also create goals for the family, but through the kiddo that's referred,
Hmm.
normally through DSS. So could this apply to that as well, or is it just
Yeah, it can. And I might even have three separate sheets to say what is it that you want to work on individually that can contribute to the family.
awesome? Could we access those sheets by chance?
Yeah, it should be part of was it
Oh,
in there?
yes, the
Yeah.
path intervention itself. Okay, yes, I
Hmm.
have that. Thank you so
Yep.
much.
Dylan?
Thank you for this presentation. Grateful to be here with you all. I heard you mention, I've kind of two questions, if that's okay. And first is, I heard you mention specifically a foster population in terms of foster kids. Are there
Hmm.
other populations with which you found play therapy is especially effective? And And then also on top of that, your theoretical framing, like what sort of theories do you find yourself leaning on or finding really useful? So, sorry for the two question setup.
No, it's fine. So play therapy, it's for any child, pretty much, because it's you can't sit down and just talk to a 4-year-old. So you would use play therapy. Child-centered play therapy is a theoretical approach. And it's really child-centered or person-centered. So that would be your person-centered theory. And with person-centered, you don't have a lot of structure. You kind of just kind of go with what they present. Same thing. It would be child-centered, person-centered play therapy where you're allowing them to come in, and that would be the pretty much the premise of what play therapy is. If you don't go, that would be your purist, that non-directive person that does not do any of the things I just told you about. They just allow the child to do the work, and that's it. And that would be a purist of a play therapist. Population wise, anybody. Um, Now, if you're going to be a little bit more direct and you're going to move into how to be a little more structured and directive, when you go through the process of becoming an RPT, you can learn Adlerian play therapy, client CBT. You would learn what's called filial and parent-child relationship therapy or theraplay, and those three are specific for working with parents. So I used to work with 2 and 3-year-olds. That's me teaching the parent with the child. We're sitting in the floor and we're engaging in play, and I'm teaching them how to engage with their child that way to eliminate the behaviors. And they would spend 30 minutes, maybe twice a week at home doing the same thing in the floor on the blanket to show that this is our time to play and engage. And that would be more your theraplay and your filial. So there are specific ones that are theoretically based for families. And then you have your Adlerian, Gestalt, Jungian. Jungian would be more along the lines of what sand tray is, in that each of the symbols is some sort of an archetype of a subconscious for you to work through the sand to kind of build the story. So there are theories in play therapy, and the 2-year process is divided into 3 phases. And each phase wants you to spend a certain amount of time in training under a theory. So it's kind of good to kind of get the history, which you'll learn about Virginia Axeline and all of that. And unfortunately, Freud is part of that too, because he had little Hans. So there's that. So there's some things there about play therapy there. And then you have all that history, and within the history, you'll learn how there's different theorists over that time period. And then you can focus on. So I got one person who she just finished her hours with me. She is an Adlerian play therapy or the therapist. She just that's her thing. She's Adlerian. I would say I'm more of prescriptive, which is more of the eclectic side of you come in, oh, this child needs Jungian, oh, this child needs Gestalt, okay, this child needs this, and I can switch to that. And I'm more of a client centered than anything. But since I'm switching populations, I'm not working with the young ones as much anymore. I do a lot more directive than I used to when I had the little ones.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Nicole, I've got a few questions for you in the chat. This one is a follow-up on the path intervention. Is this path intervention used before the play begins in therapy?
No, I can use it as an approach probably in the first phase, so maybe after a few weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you handle a crisis between sessions if you are working on one situation and a new one arises?
They would probably come in and play out whatever that crisis is. It would be no different if we're working on our work with our family, ourselves in therapy, but then something happens at work and then we come in and talk to the therapist about work. You would still allow them to work through that crisis. And sometimes you're taken out of that mode of being that play therapist, and you might do a family session and it might be more direct because of the crisis.
Do you ever use internal family systems as a theoretical approach to play therapy?
Yes and no. I don't do specifically with play. One of my goals in the next year is to learn a little bit more about internal families. There is a card deck called interactive cards. And those are from maternal family systems, and that's kind of all I know about it. So I can't say but what I do with those cards and kind of parts work would be more with adults. So that would be more of my expressive work with them. But that is something that I am looking into. One of the play therapists that was pretty well known in the community that did a lot of IFS work, she actually passed away this year unexpectedly. And so she would have been the one that a lot of us were going to go to get trained. And she's no longer with us. So we're all, there's a group of us trying to figure out, okay, who else do we go to? But it would be that she would have taught us to work with the youth, but I'm more interested in working with adults with it. Yeah. Any other questions? Nicole?
Hi, Professor Jiggetts. Good to see you. I was wondering, with your trauma certification background, how what your thoughts are on like the intersection between like TFCBT and like like child-centered play therapy or any type of play therapy modality, and if those would interact or if those would just be more separate because TFCBT is more narrative.
Yeah. I got my certified trauma practitioner training while I was at a play therapy conference for 4 days, and it's more sensory based. So we do the bottom up approach. We're doing more grounding work, sensory stuff, working through those emotions, understanding how you feel in your body, regulating, and then until we can get into the verbal processing. So I'm not trained in CBT with trauma because I felt that would kind of be a little bit of the opposite. So my approach is more sensory, which is why I have sand, or sometimes I'll have water, kinetic sand, rice bowls, all of the different techniques to use with sensory and then body awareness. But then I do utilize that with the play process. And a lot of the trauma work is also art related.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Nicole, did you say you authored a book as a question in the chat?
Yeah, I have an intervention book, in innovative healing techniques for children and adolescents, and it's on Amazon. And then the path technique is in that and is also in another family intervention book. Um, I
Say
guess
the
that
name
was
for
some question.
say the name one more time, Nicole, for everyone.
Innovative healing techniques for children and adolescents. I have a parenting one out there somewhere too. Um, I think it's like through a child's eyes. I'm not a good advertiser, as you can tell.
Yeah, no, that's not obvious at all, Nicole.
Just don't
Um,
advertise, yeah.
yeah, we have a couple minutes left. I dropped the attendance sheet in the chat. Please go ahead and submit your name on that. But does anybody have any other questions for Nicole?
I thought of one more. So you had mentioned the different styles of a play therapist. Like one was more Illyrian, I believe you had said, and then
Mhm.
you use more of an eclectic approach. What are all the
Mhm.
different styles? And what does that look like?
Um, so the eclectic, or what would be called prescriptive, is this is prescriptive if you're kind of prescribing the right theory for what is happening with that child and still using that theory based so that you're not just, oh, I'm doing CBT and then, oh, I'm doing this intervention, is you're kind of sticking with it. But then you might shift to another theory that fits for what the issue is. Or you might use prescriptive in the sense of every child, you're not just doing CBT. This child you might be doing one, this might you be doing another. Where some people are like, this is all I do. I just do child-centered play therapy, and I just do sand training. That's it. One child might be CBT, one might be Adlerian, one might be ecosystemic. Um, yeah.
Thank you.
Hmm. That was a lot in an hour and a half.
Yeah, that was
That
a
is
lot.
like, I feel like I just touched the surface.
Yeah. I mean, you gave some great examples, Nicole. I think that that's what we really appreciated is the practical stuff, the real examples. How does this work with children who have autism separation
Mm.
trauma?
Autism, since it's such a broad spectrum, that's another population I love working with. I don't, it doesn't always do well with play. So I'll be forthcoming with the parent and say, I will begin to work with your child, but if I see that ABA is more appropriate, and ABA is the total opposite of play therapy, then I need to make sure that the child's getting the right, technique. So I might start with it, but they have a hard time processing. And what I've noticed with at least three of my kids I've had in the past, is they, what is it called when they, not the echolalia. I realize that I'm watching a cartoon because they can, um, word for word play out. And the only reason why I knew one of them is because they literally cut to commercial in the middle of their play. Scripting, yes, in the middle of the play. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm watching a TV show. Oh, and then he said something. I was like, oh my gosh, this is Paw Patrol. He's not playing out something. And then I couldn't tell if that was beneficial or not. And that's where I have a hard time figuring that out. So that's a tricky one. It depends on where the child is developmentally and cognitively.
Yeah. Do you have time for one more question, Nicole? And then we'll,
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
Dylan?
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Hey, thank you so much for this. I'm going to run over too far, but I guess when I was asking earlier about population, I was interested in hearing whether or not you found, in terms of CSA survivors, that play therapy, especially in younger ages, is effective, and how you see that play out.
They would say for every child
Even like trauma survivors, kids who don't necessarily have the words to process, like, or express.
because they don't need the words. That's the whole point of the play. The
Okay.
symbols will help them to work through that. Yeah. And when I say symbols, I mean the toys
Mhm.
because they symbolize something for them. Yeah.
Nicole, thank you so much.
Well,
That was
thank you.
amazing. Really
Thank you.
appreciate you coming and talk to us all about this. Everybody, please sign the attendance sheet. And our next upcoming session is going to be in 2 weeks, March 12th, on racial trauma, practice models, and serious mental illness. Nicole, thanks so much again.
Thank you.
And
Thank
thanks for
you.
coming, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everyone. Oh, I love
you.
all the little
Yeah.
the hearts
Thank
and the
you.
hands.